The evening had been circled on the calendar for weeks. It was supposed to be simple, beautiful, and unforgettable. Mom's birthday dinner. Mom had never asked for much in life. She was the kind of woman who sacrificed silently, who smiled even when her hands were rough from work, who skipped her own meals so her children could eat. This year, I wanted her to feel special. I wanted her to walk into a place where the lights glowed golden, where music played softly, and where she wouldn't feel like just another tired soul carrying the weight of the world. When we arrived at the restaurant, her eyes lit up. She looked around at the chandeliers, the polished wooden floors, the waiters in pressed uniforms moving gracefully between tables. She clutched her little handbag, the same one she had carried for almost 10 years, and smiled like a child seeing fireworks. "This place is so beautiful," she whispered to me. "Are you sure we should be here?" I squeezed her hand. "Yes, Mom, you deserve this." But not everyone agreed. As we joined the rest of the family at the long table, I felt the shift in the air. My older brother gave me a sharp look, then leaned toward my cousin. Both of them smirked. "Wow." My brother muttered loudly enough for me to hear. "Didn't know you could even step foot in a place like this." Laughter rippled across the table. Mom's smile faltered. I tried to ignore it, pretending the sting didn't reach me. The waiter placed menus in front of us, and I noticed Mom's hands trembling as she flipped through the glossy pages. The prices were high, too high. Her eyes darted to me nervously. Before I could reassure her, my sister leaned across the table, her voice dripping with mockery. "Don't even bother, Mom. He can't afford this. Just let us order. You'll only embarrass yourselves." The words landed like a blade. The chatter in the restaurant seemed to hush, as if the whole room had heard. Mom's face drained of color. She pressed her lips together tightly, trying to hide her shame, but her eyes betrayed her. They glistened with unshed tears. I felt my chest tighten, anger rising like fire in my veins. This was supposed to be her night, a night of dignity, of celebration. Instead, they had turned it into a spectacle of humiliation. I opened my mouth to speak, to defend her, but my voice caught. The lump in my throat was too heavy. All I could do was hold her hand under the table, silently telling her, "Don't believe them. You belong here, you always have. The cruelty of family cuts deeper than that of strangers." And in that moment, I realized this birthday would not be remembered for laughter and candles. It would be remembered for betrayal. But neither Mom nor I knew that someone else had been watching, and the night was far from over. The tension at the table was unbearable. Mom sat frozen, her eyes lowered to the menu she no longer dared to read. My siblings smirked in victory, their cruel whispers still lingering in the air like smoke. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles white, my heart pounding with the urge to shout. But before I could, a shadow fell across us. "Excuse me," a calm, steady voice interrupted. We looked up. Standing beside our table was a tall man in a black tailored suit. His posture was straight, his eyes sharp yet kind. The small golden pin on his lapel identified him as the restaurant manager. He bowed slightly toward my mother. "Ma'am, is everything all right?" Mom's lips trembled as she tried to form words. She forced a smile, the same smile she always wore when she wanted to hide her pain. Yes, everything is fine." But the manager had already seen the truth in her eyes. He turned his gaze toward my siblings, his expression firm, his voice carrying the weight of authority. I couldn't help but overhear what was said. He began. His tone was polite, but every word was edged with steel. "And let me make something very clear. In this restaurant, every guest is equal. No one, no matter who they are, has the right to belittle another at my tables." The chatter of the dining hall dimmed. A few nearby diners looked over, curious. My siblings shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their earlier arrogance now replaced with unease. "Sir, it's just family talk." My cousin tried to laugh it off. You don't need to. The manager cut him off with a raised hand. Family or not, respect is not optional. His eyes flicked back to my mother, softening again, especially when it is a special evening, and tonight, I believe, is your birthday. Mom's eyes widened. She nodded slowly. Then allow me to say this. The manager continued, his voice carrying across the hushed restaurant. This lady is not just a guest tonight. She is the guest of honor. Gasps rippled through my family. My sister's smirk vanished. My brother looked down, suddenly fascinated by the tablecloth. The manager straightened his jacket and addressed the table. Her meal tonight will be on the house, and he smiled warmly at my mother. We have already prepared something special for her. At that moment, 2 waiters appeared, holding a bouquet of fresh flowers wrapped in silver paper. They placed it gently in front of Mom. Her eyes filled instantly with tears. She reached out with trembling hands, touching the petals as if afraid they might disappear. The restaurant fell silent, but it wasn't the silence of awkwardness. It was the silence of respect. Other diners watched, some even smiling, their gazes filled not with pity, but admiration for a woman who clearly deserved better than the cruelty she had endured moments earlier. For the first time that evening, Mom lifted her chin. Her eyes, though wet, shone with a light that had been dimmed for too long. And as I watched her glow under the dignity she finally received, I realized something. The night wasn't ruined. It had only just begun. The bouquet still rested in front of Mom, its fragrance wrapping around her like a shield of dignity. She kept wiping her eyes, whispering "thank you" under her breath, too overwhelmed to speak louder. My siblings, on the other hand, fidgeted in their seats, their smug confidence draining with every passing second. But the night had one more surprise. The manager, who had been quietly watching, gave me a knowing look. Then he turned back to Mom with a gentle smile. "There is something else," he said, his voice carrying just enough for the table and the curious diners nearby to hear. "Your son came here a few days ago." My heart skipped a beat. The entire table froze. "Yes." The manager continued. "He personally arranged for your flowers, your cake, and your dinner reservation. He told us it was your birthday and wanted it to be perfect. Everything we have prepared tonight, it is because of him." The words fell like thunder. I watched the color drain from my siblings' faces. Their laughter, their mocking, their cruel whispers, all of it turned sour in an instant. The people they had called too poor to afford this place was the very person who had made the evening possible. Mom covered her mouth with both hands, her eyes wide and glistening. You did this," she whispered to me, her voice trembling. I nodded, struggling to keep my composure. "Yes, Mom. I've been saving for months. I wanted you to feel special. You've given everything to us, and it's time you had something just for you." Her tears finally spilled over, sliding down her cheeks like pearls. She grabbed my hand across the table, squeezing it with a strength that spoke more than words ever could. The other diners, who had been silently watching, began to murmur approvingly. One couple even clapped softly. A stranger lifted their glass toward Mom, smiling. The entire restaurant seemed to shift. The humiliation she had been forced to endure just moments ago was washed away, replaced with honor and respect. Meanwhile, my siblings sat stiff and silent, their arrogance replaced with a shame so heavy it weighed the air down. My sister's cheeks burned crimson. My brother looked as if he wanted the floor to swallow him whole. Mom finally found her voice, though it was broken with sobs. "You've always given me more than enough," she whispered to me. "And tonight you've given me more than I ever dreamed." I smiled through my own tears. "No, Mom, tonight is only the beginning." And in that moment, it was no longer about revenge. It was about love, the kind of love that made all their cruelty meaningless. But still, The sting of truth lingered in the air like smoke after a fire. The ones who tried to shame us were now burning in their own humiliation. And the sweetest part, they had no one to blame but themselves. The cake arrived on a silver tray, its surface glowing under the warm restaurant lights. Written across the top in delicate chocolate script were the words, "Happy birthday, our queen." The room seemed to pause as the waiters placed it gently before my mother. Candles flickered, waiting for her to breathe life into a wish she had perhaps kept buried for years. "Go on, ma'am," the manager said softly. "This is your moment." Mom looked around, still trembling from everything that had happened. Her gaze lingered on me, then on the bouquet, then back to the cake. Slowly she smiled, a real smile, radiant and unbroken. She closed her eyes, whispered something only her heart could hear, and blew out the candles. The entire restaurant erupted into applause. Strangers cheered for her, for a woman they didn't know but somehow admired. The sound of clinking glasses and warm voices filled the air, washing over her like a tide of love. Meanwhile, my siblings sat in stone silence. Their earlier sneers had melted into tight jaws and downcast eyes. They picked half-heartedly at their food, too ashamed to look at anyone. The same mouths that had mocked with "you can't afford to eat here" were now sealed shut, suffocated by humiliation. And for once, I didn't feel small. For once, we didn't feel less. When the dinner ended, the manager shook my hand firmly. "You know," he said with a faint smile, "real wealth isn't in money. It's in love, in the way you honor those who raised you. Tonight, your mother is the richest woman here." I'll never forget those words. As we walked out of the restaurant, the night air cool against our skin, Mom slipped her arm through mine. She carried her flowers close to her chest like a crown. Her head held higher than I had ever seen. She looked not like a woman, worn down by years of sacrifice, but like a queen finally being recognized. She leaned closer to me, whispering, "I don't need anyone else. You've given me everything." And I knew then revenge wasn't about shouting or fighting. It wasn't about tearing them down. It was about building her up. The family that tried to shame us had been shamed by their own cruelty. Their silence was our victory. Her smile was my triumph. That night, I made myself a promise. Mom would never again sit at a table where she felt small. She would never again be made to question her worth, because the sweetest revenge is not in proving them wrong, it's in proving her right. And as we walked away together, hand in hand, I realized the words "you can't afford to eat here" would never haunt us again. Instead, they would forever remind me of the night we left richer than anyone else inside.